Dreams and Deceptions by Ifeanyi Esimai. Chapter 1. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my heart racing as Ken's ride pulled up. Part of me thrilled at his return, while another whispered doubts about our precarious new life in America. His friends and family should see us now, the I didn't see it coming couple. He's 31, I'm 26. He's the sexiest man alive material. I could pass for cute after a third, lingering glance. My short, never-styled hair barely caught the eye. My functional clothes didn't scream for attention, and my Gideon Bible, always tucked in my handbag, would spill secrets if given the opportunity. He's an extrovert. I find solace in the quieter corners of life. For bonus points, he fed from a silver spoon from birth. For me, there was no spoon. He abandoned his rich, beautiful girlfriend for a head-on collision like me. Common interests? We're both physicians, newlyweds, new immigrants, new to the Bronx, with plans to succeed in America. Outside, the Bronx streets hummed with late-night energy, distant sirens, muffled music from a nearby apartment, the rattle of the elevated train. Ken stepped out of the car and looked straight at the window, from which I was lurking as if he had night vision goggles. I stepped back, my heart thundering like a raging river in my ears. Had he seen me? My head jerked up to the flickering light from the single yellow bulb. It dangled in sync with the hopping, stomping, and running in the landlord's apartment above. His children, Dora and Diego, mimicked their television namesakes' adventures when it was time for bed. We have one we barely use, the television. I was against getting it since we had our laptops and phones, but Ken overruled me. Close to the door was a coffee table. On top of it was a bottle of wine we saved for a special day, and our special day would be when we both get into residency programs. Ken strode in at 10:30 p.m., his face etched with exhaustion and a haunted look of desperation. I smiled and raised an eyebrow. "Hey, babe." "Hey," he said, kissing me on the cheek and walking past. He shrugged off his backpack and lowered it to the floor. I sniffed the air. "What's that smell?" Ken stretched and yawned, a look of resignation on his face. "I don't think I can do this anymore." He pouted and absent-mindedly pulled at his shirt, bringing it closer for a sniff. "What smell?" "A flowery vanilla smell." Wait, he'd complained about something. I took a step toward him, his Garfield eyes barely open. "What can't you do anymore, babe?" Ken managed a smile. "Ada, I'm wiped." Ken groaned, his words slurring slightly. "This grind, it's killing me. How long can we keep this up?" He nonchalantly sniffed the backs of his hands and made a face that reminded me of smelling a week-old baby diaper pail. I borrowed a hand lotion from one of the guys after washing my hands. "Do you want to talk about the job and studying?" I said, and wrapped my arms around myself. Ken sighed. "Working and studying is proving to be as hard as finding a vein in a baby." He gave himself a cursory look. "I feel so sticky." He walked to the bathroom, stripping off his jeans, shirt, boxers, and t-shirt. Then he struck a pose, like Michelangelo's David. "I'll make it quick." The shower came on with the sound of a muffled explosion, the flow boosted by gravity, one advantage of living on the ground floor. I sat on the bed, bent over, and clutched my head between my palms. Ken worked as a pharmacy technician for 8 hours before going to Kaplan for the board exam classes. That is followed by a study group session with others he met at the premises, the airfare to the U.S., and the few months' rent we had to pay as a security deposit because of our lack of credit history left us with virtually no money. His well-to-do parents washed their hands off him since he disregarded their advice on who to marry. We planned for Ken to study for the exams while I supported him. Then we'd reverse roles when he was done. But his male pride got in the way, hence the job at the pharmacy. Now we were back to square one. My part-time job at the doctor's office, doing basic filing, paid little, but it was the only one I could find. I was still searching. The few callbacks I got said I was overqualified. The shower stopped. The sudden silence refocused my mind on our immediate problem. I picked up Ken's clothes, brushed off hair and lint, and refolded them. A shiver shot through me, as if an invisible ice serpent had crawled down my spine. I rubbed my arms. What are we going to do? Ken came out toweling himself with renewed vigor. The shower appeared to have granted him a third wind. My eyes rolled over his body. I got distracted. After we made love, Ken lay on his back, palms under his head, staring at the ceiling. Maybe we should take a year off, Ken said. Work at 2 jobs each and save. Then we could live off our savings while we studied. I sat cross-legged beside him, staring into space. 12 months is a long time. Anything could happen. Like what? Ken sounded sleepy. I turned to him. His eyes opened and closed, reminding me of a patient drifting in and out of coma. I raised a shoulder. Who knows? Maybe after the election, the new president will rescind all immigrant visas. Ken shook his head. I don't see that happening. This is a nation of immigrants. The best people from all over the world are welcome here. Doing that would be the beginning of the end for the country. His words made me think. I'll talk to the doctor I work for tomorrow. If my plan works, you can quit the pharmacy and focus on your studies while I take care of the bills. My pulse raced as I fleshed out the plan. I glanced at Ken. His eyes were shut, his mouth slightly open, his chest rising and falling gently. I looked at him for a long time. Life was tough. Finding a vein in a baby could be challenging, but with patience and the right needle, it could be done. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, and changed into my nightgown. Then I slipped beside my husband, spooning him. An old African quote came to mind. Tomorrow is pregnant. No one knows what it would give birth to. Then I thought of ultrasound machines and smiled. Chapter 2. Arriving at the pediatric clinic by 7:35, I stepped in with unease. I stepped in with nervousness. I stepped in with apprehension. It was time to be bold, audacious, and unafraid. The thought that kept me awake all night had finally arrived. Empty chairs waiting to be filled, lined walls decorated with cartoon characters. Behind a glass partition, the office manager, Selena, sat like a mother hen in her nest. "Someone's looking good today," Selena said. Her voice was warm, with the compliments of volcanic lava. "Thanks." As if conscious of her wardrobe, Selena picked up her blouse at the shoulders, admired the whimsical pattern of strawberries and sprinkles that reminded me of a donut, shrugged, and then let it fall. "Is it your birthday?" Selena asked. The crimson fabric clung to my curves, a stark contrast to my usual modest attire. "No." I gave a deprecating laugh. "I haven't caught up with laundry yet." She winked, then slipped a piece of paper through the rectangular opening in the glass. "Here's something you can catch up with." I scanned the note, a list of patients' folders to be pulled for the morning clinic. Easy peasy. It was time to ask for a slot on the doctor's schedule. I folded and unfolded the piece of paper. I inhaled and exhaled, chasing courage. Then I blurted, "Selena, I'd like to speak with Dr. Abel sometime today. Will it be possible?" She looked up, eyes narrowed, brow furrowed, lips flat like a child keeping secrets. "Pertaining to what?" She dragged out the first word. I rubbed the back of my neck. "It's personal." She held my gaze, then attacked the keyboard, her eyes on the monitor. "Okay." She blew out a sigh. "He's free around 10. I can squeeze you in. Is that okay for you?" I almost laughed with relief. A housefly would perch on any available surface. "I'll take it." I headed for the file room, feeling so light I could float away. The nurse, Maria, arrived, and I helped her prepare the examination rooms. Soon, the patients started arriving, and later, Dr. Abel. My mind raced as I pulled patients' folders. Could the good doctor and this job be my safety net? My ticket to staying in America? I kept busy by helping wherever I saw a need. 10 minutes before 10, Maria said, "You can go to the doctor's office. He'll be there as soon as he finishes with the current patient." In the doctor's office, I sat on one side of the mahogany executive table, which held a computer, mouse, and phone. On the opposite side was another leather chair that blocked the view of a bookshelf. I leaned forward to read the titles of the books, but none were familiar. They formed a collection that seemed part of the decor, something purchased solely for aesthetic reasons. My gaze returned to the wall clock in the doctor's office. Its tick, 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 which had once synchronized with my pulse, was now trying to catch up. Surrounding it were framed copies of the doctor's diplomas from college and medical school, as well as one for completing a residency in pediatrics. The doctor was already 5 minutes late. Then, I heard raised voices coming from the reception area. Was something wrong? I nibbled the inside of my cheeks, then smoothed my palms over my dress down to my knees, flattening invisible crinkles. The door opened with a whoosh, and I almost jumped out of my skin. Dr. Paul Abel strode in, smiling and displaying deep dimples along with bright eyes. With his shaved head, white coat, white shirt, and blue-striped tie, he could easily be mistaken for Michael Jordan's physician twin. I started to get up when he gave me a friendly tap on the shoulder. "Don't get up." He took off his white coat and hung it on a rack. "Sorry for keeping you waiting." He spoke in a calm, measured tone, with deliberate pauses for emphasis. He walked to the other side of the table, sat in the leather chair, scooted forward, and grinned boyishly at me with a "now what" expression. The moment of truth. My throat went dry. Dr. Abel said, "Dr. Mora? Ada? Is it okay if I call you Ada?" I nodded. He cocked his head. "I hope everything is fine. There's nothing wrong with the job, is there?" I found my voice. "No, the job is fine." His face relaxed. An eyebrow went up. "So, how can I help you?" I'd rehearsed what to say, but my prepared speech fled like a dog after a frisbee. My eyes found my twiddling thumbs on my lap. I sighed and looked up. It's about me needing some money. I'm wondering if I could get a loan from you." "Okay," he said slowly, resting his back on the chair. "But why?" I didn't hold back. I told him everything. He nodded, looking thoughtful. "The life of the immigrant physician. I understand. I went through the same process many years ago, but I wasn't married." He leaned forward. "But why not do the opposite? Maybe you're better suited to tackle the exams while working. Your husband supports you first. Then you switch after you're done." I'd expected that counter. He has 4 years' experience, and I'm fresh out of school. He has a better chance of getting into residency. "Experience trumps it all, right?" Dr. Abel said and laughed. "And it's competitive out there, too." He made a steeple with his fingers and tapped them together. "And you can't put it on a credit card?" Before I could respond, he said, "Ah, the immigrant's dilemma. No credit history, no card for you. But you need a credit card to build a credit history." I was happy he understood. The office manager and Maria, the nurse, both sang his praises. Everyone agreed he had a kind heart, but only he knew the best way to deploy his money. Dr. Abel appeared to be lost in thought. The more time he took, the more uneasy I became. Perhaps I shouldn't have asked. Finally, he leaned forward. "Did you hear the commotion at the reception area earlier?" "Yes," I said cautiously, my eyes fixed on his face. "That was Selena, the office manager. Her sister told her that their mother had suffered a stroke and was in the hospital. She left immediately." My heartbeat stuttered to life like an old tractor after several tries. So, now I have an opening for an office manager. You've been here for 4 or 5 weeks already. You know the filing system, and you're a doctor too. The job is yours if you want it. In my mind, the tractor was now up and running, sending blood through my veins. Office manager? My voice was barely audible. The job has a higher salary. I'm not a loan shark, but I can lend you the money. You can pay me back from your salary. This was even better than I'd expected. I tried to speak, but it came out as a croak. Are you serious? Very. I beamed. I was sure I looked like I had a harmonica in my mouth. Dr. Abel. Paul. Paul Doctor. Abel. I don't know what to say. He got up. Say yes. I scrambled to my feet with newfound vigor. Yes, thank you so much. No, thank you. For the record, I would have given you the loan, anyway. I guess I start right away? Dr. Abel laughed and walked over to a coat rack. His gaze flickered over me. I lowered my head and suppressed what would have been a triumphant smile. He removed his white coat and shrugged into it. I have an 11 o'clock appointment. Your guess is as good as mine. Chapter 3. Like a new mother hen, I embraced the office manager role. I welcomed patients, scheduled appointments, and paid the clinic's bills. There was no time to relax or daydream about the relief that enveloped me. Since I already had the patients' folders, I directed them to the examination rooms. I took and recorded their vital signs and informed them that the doctor would be with them soon. It was fun, but I didn't realize how much I missed interacting with patients. An hour into my new position, when we had a lull, Maria Lopez, the nurse, pulled me aside. Head cocked, stance rigid, gaze narrowed. Ada, are you after my job too? Her tone hit me like a runaway ambulance. Searing heat flooded my face, pricking my skin and leaving me simmering in a stew of awkwardness. What do you mean? I stammered. I appreciate the help, but you should focus on administrative work. You know, answering the phone, scheduling, billing. That's what Selena did. I know you're a doctor and all that, but preparing patients is my job. I stood utterly still. Then I reached for her hand. It played out, in slow motion in my mind, like the movement of a doll with dying batteries. I'm really sorry. I don't have any such intentions. I completed the admin work and didn't want to stay idle. Maria nodded. It's okay. I have friends who have medical degrees from Mexico and work in doctors' offices too. Have you taken the boards? Not yet. My husband will take first, then me. Maria's eyes widened. A doctor couple. That's great. In a few years, you guys will be a financial powerhouse. That's the plan. But I didn't say that out loud. The phone rang in the reception area. I'll get that, and I'll stay off your turf. If you need help with a patient, I'll be happy to help. The clinic had a 1-hour break when it closed for lunch. I visited Ken at work and watched them in action while I waited for his lunch break. 5 people worked in a small enclosed area that could pass for some animal pen, answering calls, picking meds from shelves, and labeling containers. They all looked harassed. The phone rang nonstop. A line of customers stood in the designated area, waiting. They could pass for a procession in church, walking to the altar for communion. You know, said a woman in her 50s standing in line, if they put someone at the second register, the line will move faster. I glanced at the pharmacy staff from the corner of my eye. No one pretended to have heard her. She might as well have been talking to the invisible man. I read somewhere that the best way to get help from a group of strangers is to identify one person in the crowd and address them directly. For example, you, in the blue scrubs, put someone on that register. Most of the time, the person in blue scrubs would be compelled to respond to you. Poor Ken. No wonder he was always exhausted when he returned for the day. Ken and I went to a bodega, but they'd run out of sandwiches, so we ended up in a restaurant in the same shopping center as the pharmacy. Ken ordered a shredded beef wrap with American cheese and habanero peppers. I ordered a tuna salad and water. I hoped I wouldn't smell fishy when I returned to the office. Ken took a big bite and chewed. "This is good." He spoke through a mouthful. I sliced and ate some lettuce and tomato. Ken swallowed. "So, what brings you to the medicine man's lair?" He took another bite. I reached for his hand and massaged it with soft strokes. "I'm so sorry, babe. I didn't know they worked you so hard." I said this in my soothing little girl's voice. Ken sighed deeply. "And it's like that all day." He took another bite. I smiled. "It's going to end soon. I have good news." I let the words hang and shoveled more food into my mouth. For a moment, we both focused on our food. I chewed quickly, eager to share the good news. I swallowed, took a sip of water, and sat up straight. Clasping my hands in a prayer position, I rubbed them together, feeling giddy. "I spoke with Dr. Abel." "About what?" I blew out air with an exaggerated shoulder slump. "Weren't you complaining you needed more time to study?" "Oh yes, that's right. My brain's fried." "So, you spoke with Dr. Abel and—" He took another bite. I sat straight, arms raised. "Well, I spoke with him, and he agreed to give me the money," I said in a bubbly voice. Ken stopped chewing. His mouth slackened and popped open. Then he resumed chewing, this time slowly. "You're kidding, right?" "No." Ken tilted his head. "He gave you the money just like that?" "Yeah." Something flashed in Ken's eyes. I'd seen that look before, about a year ago. We were at a party, and his friend asked me to dance, without consulting him first. Ken had been angry. It was unmistakable and sharp. A nervous flutter tickled my stomach. "Babe, you're not comfortable with the idea? I told you I'd come up with a plan. Isn't that what you wanted?" He inhaled and exhaled. "What if—" He paused. "What if he wants something from you in return?" Once you owe someone, it changes the dynamics of the relationship. He might want something from you. He threw out his hand. "You know, a borrower is beholden to the lender. And you won't be able to say no." "Beholden?" I shrugged. "Who uses that word? Of course he wanted something. I already gave him what he wanted." Ken sat bolt straight. His gaze darted to the left and then to the right, avoiding my eyes as if I'd taken my clothes off in the middle of a busy street. "What?" he whispered. "He offered me a job, and I took it." Ken opened his hands, fingers splayed. "But you already work for him. It's like I got promoted with double pay." The words rushed out of me. I still can't believe how lucky I was. The office manager's mom had a stroke. I'm sorry she did, but— A stroke? I snapped my fingers. Yes, Selena had to leave to attend to her. She wasn't sure when she'd be back. He offered me her job, bumped up my pay, and extended me the loan. I clenched both fists and jerked them down with a triumphant, "Yes!" Ken put down what was left of his wrap. He cocked his head, shaking it slowly. "We'll pay him back from my new salary," I said quickly to allay his concerns. He still looked bothered. I took his hands again and stared into his eyes. "Babe, if you don't think it's a good idea, we shouldn't do it." I squeezed gently. "But if you finish the boards, you can be ready to apply for residency in the next cycle. Then I'll follow, and our dreams of success will be realized." A side of Ken's lips twitched, then widened into a smile. Chapter 4. I sat behind the glass partition in the clinic, wearing a white coat over my brown skirt suit. Selena had left 4 weeks earlier, and there had been no news about her return. Dr. Abel wrote me a check for the loan the same day he offered me the job, and Ken quit the pharmacy the next day. They were pissed. Short notice. It depends on how you look at it, I'd said. It's one chapter of our lives, closing and serving as a springboard for the next. My new position was progressing nicely, and I was glad I'd stormed the blaze in my personal life like a firefighter. Dreams inspire action, and dreams pave the way for the future. Working directly with the doctor was pure joy. Although I had planned to pursue a psychiatric residency, Dr. Abel's teaching, passion, and dedication reignited my love for pediatrics. He loved discussing cases whenever a chance arose, and my soul, heart, and mind were all tuned in. On the home front, our plans were on course. Ken passed the first board exams and was studying for the second. He continued to attend classes and meet with his study group. Our schedules were so tight that most of the time, we barely had time for each other. We were like a flash of lightning in a storm, gone instantly. My new position was like having an instructor on demand, and the instructor was paying me. Dr. Abel was a good teacher and loved medicine. He spent so much time at our location and his other office at Montefiore Medical Center that I felt sorry for whomever he left at home. As we closed in the evening, I asked, "Does your significant other complain about the long hours you keep?" Dr. Abel shrugged. "No wife, no girlfriend, no kids, just me." I felt sorry for him. I have Ken, even though we barely saw each other. Since he no longer worked at the pharmacy, I couldn't pop over during my lunch break, and by the time he returned from studying, I was asleep. Always the nice boss, he invited me for an early dinner, but I declined. Ken's remark, the first day I told him about the loan, stuck in my mind like a pebble in my shoe. The relationship between a borrower and a lender always results in a power shift. "I'm meeting up with Ken." "Okay, see you tomorrow, doctor," Abel said and left. It was a white lie, but the best way to avoid temptation is not to create tempting situations. I chuckled, remembering an incident in medical school. A patient presented at the clinic with pain in the finger. Patient, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." "Doctor, stop doing that." An easy solution to a simple problem. But sometimes we stumble through doors deliberately left open. The next day, Tuesday, was one of those rare mornings when Ken woke up before I left. "Babe, I hardly see you," Ken said. "You're always gone before I wake up." "It's all for a cause. We must keep the dream alive." I swiped lipstick and rolled my lips together to even it out. I put a dash of perfume on each wrist, gathered my stuff, cell phone, handbag, jacket, and walked over to the bed. I blew Ken a kiss. "Love you." "Love you back. See you tonight." "Maybe?" I was by the door when Ken called out. "Babe." I turned. Ken scrubbed a hand over his face. "Next Monday night, I'm going to be home late." He let out a heavy sigh. "I'm meeting with my study group. We're planning a big push before the exam." The bedsheet was down, exposing Ken's torso. The dim light from the single bulb cast a sensual glow over his chiseled jawline and sharp cheekbones. My heart fluttered as I imagined tracing my fingers along his defined abs and muscular arms. I swallowed. "Not a problem." I took slow steps toward him. Above us, feet scuffled on the wooden floor. Our landlord's kids were awake. Something also awoke in me. Warmth started from my stomach, spreading down, down, down. "I'm so proud of what you've achieved in such a short time," I said in a low voice. Ken placed both palms under his head and flashed me a seductive smile. "All thanks to you." His voice tinged with an enticing undertone. I lowered myself to my knees, not an easy fit when wrapped in a down jacket like an Egyptian mummy to ward off the February chill. I traced a finger along his chin, to his chest, to his chiseled abs, to his belly button. A teepee rose from the sheets, my lips slightly parted as I added and subtracted minutes in my mind. Should I? or shouldn't I? A glance at the digital display clock on the table filled me with regret. I'll be lucky if I see the taillight of the bus at the bus stop if I don't move now. Ken sensed the shift and groaned. Are you sure? I'll be quick. Fast was what I didn't want. I exhaled. I'll make it up to you. I struggled to my feet, headed for the door, and fought the urge to return and finish what I started. Chapter 5. It was Monday, and we were swamped at the clinic. Yesterday, we had a foot of snow, and most kids had a blast outdoors. Now they've come down with sneezing, coughing, and sniffling. They cuddled their mothers and were bundled in every piece of warm clothing they had. It would have been more helpful yesterday, while they were digging in the snow, sleighing, and throwing snowballs. Thinking of cuddling, I never had time to make it up to him. He was studying so hard, and by the time he came home, I'd passed out. I cooked and saved food for him every night. He could wake me up whenever, and I'd do him, but he never did. Today was the day he said he'd be home late. A heavy feeling settled in the pit of my day-old pudding. Maybe his looming exam and the fact that I borrowed the money and was the only one working made him feel guilty. I was by the medicine cabinet weighing a patient on the stadiometer when Maria walked up. She unlocked the cabinet and said, Ada, espero que no esté tan ocupado más tarde en el día. Maria only spoke Spanish to me when we were swamped or she was stressed. She rolled her eyes, squeezed my shoulder, and said, Sorry. I hope it won't be this busy later in the day, in case you have dinner plans. She brought out a box of sterile swabs. I can't pick up any overtime tonight. When I had a break from the phone, I helped process patients. Then, when the patient was done, I wiped down the room and prepared it for the next patient. I was about to ask if she had a date when I remembered the young patient standing on the scale. Are you going to Bellevue tonight? Maria nodded. The kids are home too. I need to see how they're doing. She sighed. I wish I hadn't had them right away. Be like you. Enjoy myself for some time. No boyfriend or husband, just me. I knew that would be hard. She was hit on all the time. Maria has an okay face, a nice body with a slim waist, and a big butt. The type you have to put a fence around to stop guys and even girls from cupping a feel. But I have Ken. I'm not alone. We hope to have kids one day. Maria blew out the hair from her face. Good luck. Kids can be a handful. I hope my boys aren't worse. Maybe I can catch a few hours of sleep before my next gig. There must be something in the air. Maybe, Maria said. They were rolling around in the snow yesterday and refused to come back in and layer up. Now they're coughing and sneezing. Luckily, my mom is there to watch them. That was going to be my next question. Okay, that's good. I adjusted the weight on the scale. It was a steady onslaught of kids with their parents. Maria left around 4:30. Luckily, the phone stopped ringing about then. I got the patients ready for the doctor without too many interruptions. By 5:30, as the sun was setting, the number of kids coming in had dropped to a trickle. In the next 3 hours, we were all caught up. I cleaned up and prepared for tomorrow. I was by the filing area when I heard my name, so I strolled over to the reception area. When I walked in, Dr. Abel was sitting in one of the chairs in the reception area. He had pulled his eyes away from the TV. Ada, busy day, right? Yes, but we did it. He glanced around. What about Maria? She left already. She needed to get back home and check on her kids. I chuckled. And also give their grandmother a break. She was with the kids all day. Dr. Abel nodded. Thank you so much. All our patients seem to have showed up today. He gestured with his hand. Now nobody is here. I know. They kept on coming and coming, but we handled it. I pumped my right fist in the air. Woohoo! Teamwork! An awkward silence followed. Dr. Abel glanced at the TV. I followed his gaze. An ad with a famous news anchor told kids to eat fruits and vegetables. I knew what was coming next. Similar to every other day we worked late, he'd invite me for dinner. Dr. Abel turned to me. I'm famished. My guess is you are too. I pursed my lips and said nothing. What about dinner? He raised both hands, palms out. Before you say no, it's just a way of saying thank you for today. And it's on me. My lips curled into a smile, and I looked down, pulling my white coat tighter around me. How do I get out of this one? You don't look a gift horse in the mouth. He chuckled and continued to press his point. It's only dinner. Okay, you pick the place. Ken's words a few weeks ago reverberated in my mind. The borrower is beholden to the lender. How do I say no to my boss? My phone buzzed. My lips parted in a silent gasp. A lifeline for a drowning woman. Excuse me? I stepped away and retrieved my cell from my pocket. A message from my husband flashed on the screen, unusual for this time of day. Ken. Babe, don't wait up. Study group. Remember? Love you. I pressed my lips tight. I'd hoped it was a text that he was coming home early. For a moment, I felt like my heart was shrinking. Yes, he told me about it. Here I was, trying to fend off a man dying to give me attention while my husband was in a study group. To pretend all was well, I smiled. A bitter smile. I hope Dr. Abel didn't notice. Then I thumbed my reply. Me. Okay, study hard. XXX. The news anchor wrapped the ad on the TV with a stay strong and healthy. Ken would not come home until later, so I would be home alone. I considered Dr. Abel's invitation again. He was not asking me out on a date. He was not forcing me to go out with him, and he wasn't trying to seduce me. Abel and I sat at a table for two. The flickering light from the tall taper candle created a romantic ambiance. It cast a warm, gentle glow on Dr. Abel's face, highlighting his handsome features, and brought a certain depth to his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. The scent of the candles and the smell of steak, fried food, and his cologne created a blend that lingered in the air. The low murmur of voices, the clink of glasses by happy couples toasting their love, and the sound of cutlery on china created a symphony of sounds, a soothing backdrop punctuated by the occasional joyful laughter. Dr. Abel shifted his chair forward and fixed his twinkling eyes on me. You got us a table at Vista Verde in Riverdale with just a phone call? And not to mention on Valentine's Day? My nostrils flared. My heart thudded. My lips smiled. I looked away, hiding my unexpected joy at having impressed him. He threw out his hand. I didn't even know today was Valentine's Day. Maybe that's why I couldn't get a table anywhere, let alone an upscale restaurant, minutes from the Westchester County line. How did you pull it off? Well, if I tell you, then I'll have to kill you. I'm inquisitive, Dr. Abel said, then grinned. Death by your hands would be a worthy death. I gritted my teeth and raised both hands, palms out. Okay. I better shut him up before he says something out of line. I'll tell you. After the third, sorry, we're fully booked. I knew I had to think about their needs to make it happen. When the next restaurant answered, and it was a woman, I said I wanted to make a reservation for an interview with a handsome doctor who saved 30 kids' lives today in the Bronx. He's well respected, and it's free PR for your restaurant when it's featured as the place where the interview took place. Then she asked what time was I looking for. Dr. Abel chuckled. Handsome, respected, eh? He glanced around furtively. That means they'll kick us out soon. A waiter in penguin colors approached. Dr. Abel's smile wavered. I'm Sam, your waiter for tonight. Are you ready to order? I glanced at the menu, heat prickling along my neck. I blinked repeatedly. The cost, not indecision, took my breath away. Take your time, the waiter said. I'll be back. Once he was gone, I leaned forward. Dr. Abel. He raised a finger, cutting me off. Say after me, Paul. Paul. Again. I laughed. Of course I can say that, but it's inappropriate. You're my boss. We're not in the office, so it's appropriate. Okay, Paul. So, Paul, can you order for me? You trust me that much? I held his gaze. Of course. The waiter returned, poured wine, and Paul ordered. Paul raised his glass. A toast? To what? I asked. We're just having dinner. We'll toast you. To new beginnings. To your success. I raised my glass. To new beginnings. To a great boss. We clicked glasses. I wanted to know more about my boss and bombard him with questions. I took a sip and lowered my wine glass. I find it hard to believe you didn't know it was Valentine's Day. Honestly, I didn't. He shrugged. I had no reason. But what about you? I inhaled and let it out slowly, remembering the red heart-shaped box of chocolates I'd left on the coffee table at home. Let's not talk about me. I think you're more interesting. 30 minutes later, I didn't know if it was the red wine, the fresh oysters, or the Cornish hen flavored with garlic and aromatic spices, but Paul and I were inseparable as shadows. He answered every question I asked, sharing his motivation to become a physician, to wear a stethoscope, and why he specialized in pediatrics, because kids bounce back with treatment. He also shared what he was looking for in Ms. Wright. He even shared a confession, too. Dr. Abel bit his lower lip and said, "When I find her, she'll have full lips, high cheekbones, flawless skin, healthy rich hair, and smart. She could pass for your twin." Adrenaline rushed through me, a feeling of being called up on stage to receive an award with a crowd watching ran through me. I blinked and broke eye contact with him. Paul picked up his glass and twirled it. Sometimes what we're looking for is staring us right in the face, but we're too late. She belongs to another. Your husband is a fortunate man. I chucked up his outspokenness to an excess of red wine, but his words sent my temperature soaring. After the fuzzy feeling in my stomach subsided, I said, "I'll be looking for her for you." He laughed. That's the spirit. I checked the time on my cell. It was getting late. I still have work tomorrow. I had a great evening, Paul. Thank you. He threw out his hand. But we are not done. The expression on Paul's face reminded me of a little boy having the time of his life in the playground, and the mother said it was time to go. Alarm bells went off in my head. I couldn't get carried away. I was a married woman. It was one thing to say no to a boss trying to use their position to up one on you, but another to say no to a gentle soul who had fallen for you and wished they'd met you earlier. Ada, we can't call it a night without dessert. I saw a befitting dish on the menu. He caught the waiter's eye and waved him over. The waiter topped our wine glasses. Paul ordered. Once the waiter left, he raised his glass. Another toast to the best spontaneous Valentine's dinner ever. I giggled. I'll toast to that. I raised my glass. Paul was discussing strategies for passing the medical boards and enhancing my residency application when the waiter brought our dessert. Candlelight danced across his silver tray, revealing dark cherries bathed in a sauce with a glossy sheen. Around us, other couples in the restaurant murmured their oohs and ahs. My eyes lit up. With a flourish, the waiter lit the cherries, sending a cascade of blue flames dancing over the dark, glossy fruit. I couldn't hold my surprise. Wow! I caught a glimpse of Paul. His eyes were on me. The warmth in his eyes matched the fiery spectacle on our table. This is magical, I whispered as I watched the flickering light. I locked eyes again with Paul. What I saw in them had my heart doing somersaults. Not as magical as this moment with you, he replied softly. The flames died down, leaving behind a rich, sweet aroma. Paul and I leaned in, our spoons meeting in the warm, indulgent dessert. The taste perfectly blended sweetness and warmth. A fitting end to an unplanned, romantic Valentine's Day dinner. Paul was a gentleman through and through. He insisted on dropping me off, despite my protests. "I won't be able to sleep if I wasn't sure you got home safely," Paul argued. "I'll text you once the Uber drops me off." It was late. He was right. Eventually, I relented. We drove in his midnight blue Mercedes. After he pulled to the curb and I got out, he didn't drive off until I got my keys, opened the door, waved, and stepped into the apartment. It had been a good evening, crowned by a fantastic dinner. I hoped Ken would be back soon so I could tell him all about it. I shut the door, locked it, and reached for the light switch. Something grabbed me from behind. Chapter 7. I uttered a small scream and whirled, my back pressed against the door, staring at the dark figure that had grabbed me. It was a familiar shape. "Ken, you scared the bejesus out of me. I thought you were at the study center." I placed a hand on my chest, feeling my still hammering heart. I flipped the light switch. "Why are you in the dark?" Ken's expression was as unappealing as mud smeared across a pristine canvas. I pushed it aside. "Where have you been?" His voice was tight and emotionless. I was tired and weary and worn out, but I must be meek and timid and graceful. "Work?" I said, kissing his cheek and moving past him. Upset, I thought. He turned around and followed. "You must have exhausted yourself to be dropped off by your boss." I smiled. "Yes, it was crazy busy today. Kids coming in sneezing, coughing, sniffling." I glanced over my shoulder. "They must have—" I froze. "Babe, what's wrong?" I didn't want his concerns to swell like bread dough in the oven. "Did something happen in the study group?" A muscle jumped in Ken's jaw. "Look at the time. Is this what you do every night I'm not here?" My forehead furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ken jabbed a finger toward the window. "I was standing right there and saw you get out of the Mercedes. I threw out my hands. "That was Dr. Abel, my boss." Ken slashed the air. "Did the bus stop running? Has Uber gone out of business?" "We worked late, and he insisted on dropping me." I touched his arm. "Babe, please don't be mad. I would have insisted on leaving early if I knew you'd be home. Why are you so upset? Remember you sent me a text not to wait up for you?" Ken was like that baby who was given a rattle for the first time. He kept on pushing and pushing. Who comes back from work by this time of the night, dressed like that? I raised both hands and rolled my eyes. "Babe, stop it. I left for work dressed in this outfit. I'm more or less the face of the clinic. We had a lot of patients. Even Maria, whose kids were sick, stayed a little longer to help us catch up." Heat flushed through my skin. Something must have happened at his study group. 3 sharp bangs came from upstairs. We both looked up. I gestured with my hand to the ceiling. Probably the landlord or his wife, hitting their floor with a broomstick. I glared at Ken. "Lower your voice," I said in a hushed tone. "You're going to get us kicked out of here." Ken opened his mouth, then closed it. His sports jacket was open. Inside, he wore a V-neck sweater over a white button-down shirt. "You're all dressed up too," I said, waving a hand up and down in front of him. "Who dresses up for a study group?" He pressed a fist against his lips, chest heaving. Then he exploded. "Don't make it about me!" He jabbed a finger in my face. "You're the one sleeping with your boss. I warned you when you borrowed money from him." I gasped. My hand flew to my mouth. Did I hear right? I couldn't believe it. Oh my God. I was going to be sick. I struggled to find the right words to express my hurt. "Babe, I borrowed money so we can pay for your classes and for you to study without the distraction of work." Ken said nothing. I stumbled back. You accuse me on Valentine's Day? I sighed and glanced at the table where I'd left the heart-shaped red box of chocolates next to our special occasion wine bottle. It was gone. He didn't even give me anything. When your text came when I was at work, I thought you'd cut short the study group. I'd expected to see a text that said, "It's Valentine's Day. Let's meet up at home." I even imagined us just eating noodles together at home. Ken swallowed, but still said nothing. His chest had stopped moving, as if he'd been running for his life. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. So, what happened? What got you so wound up? Ken sighed. Nothing happened. I know what rich guys can be like, especially. He didn't have to finish. I filled in the blanks. He was insecure and oppressed. It reminded me of how I felt when I had short hair and couldn't buy decent clothes, and nobody gave me the time of day. Babe, I'm yours. You can have me whenever you want. It was late, and Dr. Abel wanted to make sure I got home safely. Remember, I'm the new office manager at the clinic. God forbid something happened to me. Ken swallowed and scrubbed his hands over his face. I filled in the silence. We finished at the clinic. I hadn't eaten all day, and my stomach belted out deep-throated tunes. Ken chuckled. I twiddled my thumb and wrung my fingers. But I was hungry. I looked at Ken. How do you say no to a passerby who helped you change a flat tire on a deserted road when he asks for a ride down the road? Ken didn't meet my eyes. I don't know either, I said, dipping my chin. Dr. Abel invited me to dinner. He's been inviting me since I took over the new job, and I'd been saying no. Today was no exception. I said no, but after I got your text, I accepted, and we ate at Riverdale. A guttural roar rose in Ken's throat. My breath caught as if the air had turned to ice. A vein pulsed in Ken's temple. His hands balled into fists. He'd never hit me, but I retreated a step. I knew it! All these big shots are all the same. All he wants is to get into your panties. He waved his hand nonchalantly. You can keep your money bag. It's over. I met someone too. My jaw could have been made from ice. It appeared to melt and hit the floor. Ken turned. At least she's someone I can build a future with, he said over his shoulder. Someone who has my back and is trustworthy. A hollow laugh rose in my throat, but the realization of his betrayal strangled it. Bye-bye, Ada. You can go back to your doctor, Cain and Abel. He dashed for the exit in short staccato steps. He slammed the door, eliciting a few seconds of aggressive barking from neighborhood dogs. The room spun. His words echoed in the sudden void he'd left in his wake. He'd closed the door and his heart to me. Chapter 8. A few more dogs howled and barked in the background. My heart was racing, my lungs burning, and my mind whirling with confusion. Should I have run after him? I tried to move, but disappointment and hurt pinned me down like a cave-in victim. I couldn't believe it. After all we'd been through, Ken accused me of cheating and walked away. How long had this been going on? Did this new person demand he get rid of his wife? And he picked a fight to make it happen. I struggled to my feet, stumbled to the door, and pulled it open. My gaze darted in every direction. There was no Ken. I locked the door and crawled back to bed. I couldn't help but think about how much everything had changed since we first met. My mind drifted back to when I met Ken a year ago. I was a wallflower, minding my business as a house officer in his unit at the university teaching hospital with 2 other house officers. We all reported to Dr. Ken Mora. He was intelligent, tall, handsome, and 5 years older than me. Dr. Mora must have been impressed by my academic achievements, tenacity, and work ethic. Or maybe my poor, humble upbringing triggered the savior factor in him, the need to save and protect the ground-trodden. I was barely 2 weeks in the unit when he took me under his wing, teaching me and giving me extra responsibilities, which I took on with no complaints. I worshipped the ground he walked on. I often caught myself daydreaming, entertaining the fanciful thought that, perhaps, there could be more between us in another lifetime. However, as the days melded into weeks, my dreams came through. Those didactic sessions turned romantic. A wedding followed, and now this. How did we fall so far? Every fiber of my being screamed in desperation as I tried to find a way to make Ken understand the depth of my commitment to him. My every action had been a testament to my fierce love for him. Why wasn't he seeing it? Having dinner with Dr. Abel was a sacrifice, a reluctant step I took, and it was only dinner. How could I make Ken understand I was in debt to Paul because of my love for him? It couldn't be over. I couldn't let it be over. I tried Ken's number, but he didn't answer. After the third attempt, his phone went to voicemail. He had switched it off. I followed up with half a dozen texts, but received no reply. I slept on it. A rested mind is likely to point me in the right direction, but I barely slept. I lay tossing and turning. I got out of bed around 6 a.m. The next day, February 15th, and checked my phone. There was nothing from Ken. I had to speak to someone. The only friends I had were those I met through Ken. They'd be useless to me. I could ask Maria, but she'd say something like, "Good riddance. All men are dogs. You're a doctor with no kids, no husband or partner of any kind. I wish I were in your shoes. Finish your medical residency, and the sky is your limit." The only person who could give a helpful response was Dr. Abel. I could talk over lunch with him. My stomach felt heavy at that thought, as if I'd consumed a bowl of pounded yam. What if Ken saw us? His false accusations would be restored in his mind. I killed that plan. I'd talk to him in the office before he started seeing patients. I went to the bathroom to get ready. Chapter 9. The next morning, I got to the clinic and could tell someone was there before me from the light under the door. Dr. Abel, maybe? I opened the door and stepped in. It was the office manager. "Hi, Ada." "Selena?" I'd forgotten about her. "Hey, good to see you." I don't think my tone conveyed the same sentiment. "How's your mom?" "Recovering," Selena said. "My sister relieved me. So good to be back." I wondered if Dr. Abel knew she was returning today. I took off my jacket and hung it in the coat cabinet. My mind was racing. With Selena back, what was my duty? What was I going to do? Selena's passion for the job was evident in her demeanor. The silence in the air was not empty. It was heavy with ambiguity. Selena pushed a piece of paper toward me. "This is a list of patients to be seen today." She carried on as if she had never left. I went to the file room, glanced at the list, pulled a folder, and placed it on the table. If demoted, I'd earn less. I still had to pay Dr. Abel back, buy food, and pay rent. Even though I was already doing that now, it wouldn't be the same. My immigration status was as Ken's wife. What would become of my application if we were no longer together? Could I still work? The image of being shackled, tossed into a plane, and deported flashed through my mind. A sharp itch on my scalp bounced to my back, then my armpit. Heat flashed through me. I smelled my perfume, deodorant, and something else. Fear. My shoulders slumped. I threw up my hands and let them fall. "You have to be hopeful," I muttered and chewed on my lower lip. Hope inspires survival. Hope never guarantees success. With Ken gone, my future looked bleak. I was behind the glass partition in the reception area when Dr. Abel walked in. His expression convinced me he didn't know Selena was coming back either. Dr. Abel's eyes widened, and then a practiced smile followed. "Mrs. Lopez, you're back." "Good morning, doctor," Selena said, beaming. Good to see you. Good to see you too, Dr. Abel said. How's your mother? Dr. Abel smiled apologetically at me, then glanced at Selena as she repeated what she'd told me about her mother. The doctor glanced at his watch and said, Nice to have you back, Selena. Bring me up to date later. He turned to me and said, Dr. Mora, can I please see you in my office? I followed him back to his office and shut the door. Dr. Abel took off his coat. Ada, I just wanted to say thank you for last night. I had the best unplanned Valentine's dinner ever. He hung it on the hanger and retrieved his white coat and stethoscope. What's wrong? I didn't say anything. He walked over to me and said, Is it about Selena? I didn't know she was returning today, but rest assured, your job is safe. The tension coiled tight inside me, dissolved. I filled my lungs and blew it out in a rush. Thank you. You're also free to come to my rounds at Montefiore. You'll learn a lot more there too. With the job uncertainty cleared, I wanted to tell him about last night, about Ken, but I couldn't bring myself to. Maybe Ken would come back. Thank you so much. My mood resembled parting clouds after a storm. I better get back before the first patient comes. I walked to the door. The heat I felt on my back was his gaze following me out. A week later, I hadn't spoken with Ken. His phone was no longer switched off. He didn't take my calls or return my texts. I still hadn't mustered the courage to speak to Dr. Abel and ask for his advice. Was Ken just stubborn, or was that his plan all along? I knew he was alive and kicking because he was still posting on social media. But I was worried. Every day on the news, on the clinic's TV, there was always talk about illegal immigrants. Was that in my future? In the days that followed, the only thing that kept me sane was going to Montefiore. I shadowed Dr. Abel during his rounds and learned a lot about inpatient care in an American teaching hospital setting. Every day after work, I'd return to the apartment, expecting to see Ken. His toiletries were in the bathroom, his clothes in the closet, but no Ken. I was too proud to chase after a man who no longer wanted me. Tired of waiting for Ken, I occupied my time with studying for the medical boards. Dr. Abel, Paul, was incredibly fantastic and always a gentleman. Exactly a week after Valentine's Day, he said, Ada, are you happy here? There seems to be something making you unhappy. It's Ken. My voice broke. His eyebrows drew together. Is he all right? I nodded, then shook my head. I tried to hold back tears, but the dam broke, and they came in torrents. Paul took me in his arms, as if I belonged there. Dear, it's okay. Let it all out. I cried my heart out on Paul's chest. I'm so sorry. I've messed up your suit. Nonsense, he said, comforting me as he ran his hand up and down my back. If a tear-soaked suit is all it takes to put a smile back on your face, go for it. We'll call it a victim of the Kentos and Ada geezer. I laughed. There we go. That's the Ada I know. It's not good to keep things bottled up. Talk to me. Perhaps I can help. You never know. Later that evening, we went to McDonald's. We ordered and took a corner table. A few minutes later, the waiter brought our food to our table. Wow, this is new, Dr. Abel said. They bring the food to you? Things have changed since I last was inside one of these. I told him everything, over chicken nuggets, fries, and strawberry milkshake. Everything. He nibbled as I spoke, his eyes on me. When I was done, I slumped forward, resting my elbows on the table. The relief of unburdening myself was beyond words. Dr. Abel dusted his hands, folded them on the table, and leaned forward. Ada, I can't deny you fascinate me. You're smart and pretty, and you have a good heart. In fact, I think I'm in. My hand with a piece of fries froze midair, with my mouth open. I went completely still. He let out a sigh. I wish I'd met you earlier, but I know you belong to another. You love him, and he loves you. Your happiness is my concern. I put the food in my mouth and chewed. Listen, I can't claim to understand Ken's heart, no more than a celibate priest grasping the intricacies of marriage. I chuckled. But I see the way you care about Ken. It pains me to be the wedge between you two. He raised his hands. My palms are clean. I'll never be the one breaking up a marriage. He placed his elbows on the table. The truth is, pride has no place in love. It is an unwelcome guest. Even the strongest bonds risk crumbling when pride stands in the way of open conversation or explanation. He paused, took my hand, and squeezed gently. You need to find him, Ada, before it's too late. Chapter 10. The following day, after pulling patients' folders at work, I called Ken. 3 times, it rang and went to voicemail. I put my phone away and pondered what to do next. My job was secure, and maybe I might survive without him. I stared into the distance, remembering the night everything had changed for us. We were on call. He was the senior doctor, and I'd gone to brief him in the call room. It was a stormy night, and he was on his cell phone. My lips parted, and I smiled wistfully. I exhaled and retrieved my phone. I placed a call to mend a broken heart. He answered on the second ring. What do you want? His voice was music to my ears. I was so flustered I couldn't speak. Ken let out a heavy sigh. Something got your tongue? I want to talk to you, I stammered. Speak. No, face to face. Initially, he was reluctant, but he eventually agreed to meet during my lunch break in a public place. I chose a place I don't usually go to in case I get emotional. We met at Applebee's on 3rd Avenue. The lunchtime crowd had withered by the time I got there. I was welcomed by the unmistakable scent of sizzling burgers, the sweet, smoky fragrance of barbecued ribs, and the occasional whiff of freshly brewed coffee. While waiting for my turn with the receptionist, I saw Ken seated in a booth. A warm, fuzzy feeling swept through me. He was preppy dressed, as if he were already earning an attending physician's salary. When I got close, he stood up and spread his arms, and a strong force pulled me in. He wrapped his arms around me. Our reunion rivaled that of the biblical prodigal son. I held on tightly. His smell and the firmness of his body reminded me of what we were, what we could still be. I missed him. Hey, he said, gently untangling himself. He pointed at the seat opposite him. I was glad it was a booth. The way the seats rode high provided a feeling of security and privacy. Do you want anything? Coffee? Pasta? Steak? I already ordered to go. My stomach was tied in knots. No, thank you. Ken refused to meet my eyes. His gaze darted from one side of the restaurant to the other. He tapped his fingers on the table. I waited for him to fill the silence. Even though I'd asked for the meeting, I learned my lesson the last time by talking about the dinner with Dr. Abel. I don't know where to begin, Ken said. We've all made mistakes. A wave of relief washed over me, as if I'd emptied my bladder after waiting an hour. Tears welled behind my eyelids. I leaned forward. We shouldn't let a little misunderstanding try to ruin us. Clasping my hands under my chin, I said, I love you, Ken. You didn't give me a chance to explain. You think it was a mistake? Ken drew back. No. He raised both hands, his head swiveling like a windshield wiper. Ada, it's over. Over. He reached into his suit's inner pocket. I have something for you. My heart thudded. What? He placed an envelope on the table and pushed it toward me. I looked at him, then at the envelope, and back to him. What's that? It's the money you borrowed from your boss to pay for Kaplan. Oh. The hope that surged in my heart dropped like a pheasant felled by a hunter's bullet. By returning the money, he'd shut the door on reconciliation. It's all there, Ken said. I sighed, took the envelope, and stuffed it in my coat pocket. "Thank you," I said barely audibly. We remained in silence. "What's she like?" Ken's eyes lit up. Then I wish I hadn't asked. Not too long ago, his eyes did that for me. "She's a doctor, too. Her uncle is a big shot at one of the major hospitals in New Jersey. He's guaranteeing me He caught himself, so that was his justification. Whatever it takes to get ahead. So he used me. I washed, I cleaned, I cooked, I sucked, I fucked. And all I got was this lousy t-shirt. My chest burned as though I'd swallowed liquid wax. "Do you love her?" I asked. Ken said nothing. "Does she love you?" Ken said nothing. I nodded. If he doesn't love her, then he still loves me. The thin ice I was walking on got a blast of Arctic air. It was my turn for a last-ditch effort. I reached for his hand. He tensed, but didn't pull away. Would you come back to me after she helps you get a residency spot?" I caressed his hand, looking him straight in the eyes. Ken swallowed. His nostrils flared. I licked my lips slowly. "Would you come back?" I asked again, my voice softening into a pathetic plea. I searched his eyes for a glimmer of hope, the mops, buckets, or rags for the cleanup after the shit hit the fan. He opened his mouth. At that moment, the waiter brought his takeaway. "There you go, sir." He placed the bag on the table. Ken snatched his hand back, his chest heaving. The waiter said, "Anything else I can assist you with?" Ken forced a smile and said, "That's it." I watched the waiter walk away. I prayed someone would pour hot oil on him in the kitchen. I turned to Ken. "What were you about to say?" Ken took a deep breath and let it out slowly through his nose. "Babe, Ada, I should go. When are you normally home?" I stopped breathing, air bottled up in my chest. If he was coming to the apartment, there was still hope. "Not before 4. I bit my lower lip and raised an eyebrow. "Okay." Ken stood and left. Chapter 11. I rushed back to the apartment as soon as I could get away to meet Ken and got there by 4:30 p.m. I placed my backpack on the table next to the special bottle of wine. I walked in and looked around. I could see that the room was empty, but the air felt, for lack of a better word, disturbed. I called his name. I got no answer. I called his name again, louder and louder. Still no answer. I walked into the kitchen. He wasn't there. I opened the closet door and looked in. My clothes were there, but not his. My heart thudded. I lowered my eyes to the closet floor. My duffel bag was there, but the cabin suitcase with the swivel wheels was gone. My chest felt tight, a drumbeat of discomfort, rhythmically constricting with each shallow breath I dared to take. I rushed to the bathroom and opened the door. Turning the light on, I noticed a yellow sticky post-it note taped on the drug cabinet mirror. I plucked it with the precision and finality of a Brazilian wax technician. The delayed pain came as I read. The disturbed air I felt earlier was the echo of his goodbye. It was over. Nada. Zilch. Ken had left me for good. I didn't have time to react. I whirled to 3 loud knocks on the door. Who could it be? A throbbing started in my head. I stumbled toward the door. The knocking continued. A heavy, authoritative rhythm that grew more insistent. I peeped at the window and drew back, surprised to see a uniformed law enforcement officer. "Oh God," I mumbled. "What now?" I walked toward the door, only then noticing that Ken had taken his TV. I opened the door. The officer held an official-looking envelope in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Ada Mora, ne? Arcor?" the officer asked, his voice terse and official. "Yes." It came out as a squeak. I cleared my throat. "That's me. I have legal documents for you," he said, extending an envelope. "You've been served." My gaze darted from the envelope to the officer. "What is this?" "I'm just here to deliver the papers, ma'am. I'm not here to discuss the details. Please sign here." I managed a chicken scratch because my hand shook so much. I took the envelope. At the top, the word divorce was printed in bold letters, accompanied by the court's official seal. A sculptor could be chiseling away inside my skull. My heart sank like an Alka-Seltzer tablet, fizzing on its way to the bottom of a glass, a drink I'd need soon. A sense of foreboding settled in my stomach. The officer gave a non-committal shrug and said, "Have a good evening." He strolled away. I shut the door behind him, clutching the envelope. I was alone in the dimly lit room, the weight of the words on the envelope sinking in. This official visit marked the undeniable end of my marriage, and I was left to face the harsh reality of a new life. I tore the envelope open and pulled out the contents with trembling hands and eyes, scanning the legal documents. The word divorce stood out in bold letters at the top of the page, followed by the intricate legal language outlining my marriage's dissolution. I collapsed onto the mattress and grasped the sides of my head, clutching my hair as sobs racked my body. Overwhelmed by the rush of emotions, time seemed to blur. Slowly, a realization dawned through the haze of tears. This was real. This was happening. I stood and walked to the coffee table. With trembling hands, I uncorked the bottle of wine we had saved, lifted it to my lips, and drank deeply as tears streamed down my cheeks. Chapter 12. I considered taking a sick day in the morning, and I thought and thought and thought about the shitty night I had, and that I wouldn't be a team player if I didn't show up. Instead, I arrived 2 hours late. Selena raised an eyebrow, fixing me with a glassy stare. "Hi," I said, not bothering to explain. "Dr. Abel wants to see you right away," Selena said. My pulse picked up. I nodded and put away my coat. Why does he want to see me? He wasn't going to fire me. He said so himself. I bumped into Maria as she exited an examination room. "Girlfriend," Maria said, "the boss wants to see you." "Yes," Selena told me. "Everything okay?" She looked at her watch. Is coming 2 hours and 2 minutes late not reason enough? I opened my mouth to give her an excuse, but then, realizing she was joking, I wagged my finger at her. "He said, as soon as you come in." She beamed at me. "You're keeping secrets from me. Maybe he wants to fire me for being late." Maria rolled her eyes and made a puffed sound. "That will be the day. He's in between patients. If I were you, I'd go right now." I retrieved my handbag from the coat room and headed for his office. I knocked and entered. "Good morning, doctor. Sorry, I'm late." Paul looked up from his computer. "Good morning." He gestured at the chair opposite him and took a sip from the mug on the table. I sat down. "Were you able to clear things up with Ken?" I pursed my lips and reached into my handbag. I brought out the envelope and gave it to him. Paul stared at the envelope with X-ray capability intensity. "What's this?" "The money I owe you. Ken gave it back." He let out a heavy sigh. He took the envelope and tossed it next to his mug. "So, what happened?" I looked at him and said, "Nothing. Everything is over." My voice was a flat monotone. He sat back in his chair, his facial expression similar to someone who got word their mother had passed in a house fire. He tried to speak twice, but couldn't decide on the correct order of words. Finally, he said, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do?" "It's too late." I reached into my bag and brought out a second envelope. "He filed for divorce." Dr. Abel leaned forward, his eyes as wide as manhole covers. He instantly reminded me of Arsenio Hall's character in Coming to America, specifically the scene where the king rescues him, promising punishment, a bath by naked women. Divorce? He said it in a way that suggested Ken must be a moron to consider that. Yes, now I don't know what to do. A knock on the door diverted our attention. Selena poked her head in. "Doc, Your 10:30 is ready. I'll be right there. Selena left. Paul and I got up together. Ada, let's continue this discussion later. What about dinner tonight? I nodded, and we left his office. For the rest of my time at the clinic, I felt overheated. I went to put away the folders of patients already seen and ended up sticking them in the wrong bins. Paul's remark had thrown me into a mess of confusion. Maria and I went out for lunch. I showed her the divorce papers over chicken salad and coffee. "Congratulations," Maria said through a mouthful of lettuce and chicken. She chewed and swallowed. "Why does your husband want a divorce anyway? Let me guess, another skank." I nodded. "But you guys had a plan. He's dumping you, a doctor for a barista." "What does she do?" I let out a breath. "She's a doctor too. Her uncle is a big shot at a New Jersey hospital, and she's helping him get into a competitive residency program." Maria nodded. "Now I get it. He traded you in for a better model with all the bells and whistles, plus free car washes?" I swallowed, pursed my lips, and dipped my chin. "What a selfish bastard," Maria hissed. We ate in silence. Then Maria snapped shut the lid to her salad container. "I'm stuffed." I pushed my food around. Although said in jest, Maria's words did not bounce off, like squash balls against a wall. Chapter 13. Dr. Abel. Paul took me to Vista Verde in Riverdale, where everything started. It was less crowded than the last time we were there. We finished dinner and enjoyed the same dessert we had on Valentine's Day. It was magical. I forgot about Ken, about the divorce, about my immigration status. Paul was all smiles. He rubbed his hands together, leaned forward, and said, "Ada, I think I'm now free to express what I think about Ken." I chuckled, glanced away, and then back at him. "Okay, let's hear it." "I think Ken is a fool for letting you go," he said matter-of-factly. I wanted to say I couldn't agree more, but I held my tongue. I wanted to hear him out. Paul raised a finger, his eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. "But I'm ecstatic he did that." His voice carried a warmth and gratitude that could fill a room. My ears perked up. Paul continued, "I'm a witness to who you are. You were dedicated to him, even putting your marriage on the line to make him happy. Instead of being thankful, he abandoned you. As the saying goes, some men don't know what they have until it's in their rearview mirror." He shook his head. "Ada, I can't hide what's in my heart anymore." My heart chugged like a runaway train, threatening to burst through my ribcage. "I love you, Ada. Since the first day you showed up at the clinic, looking for work." A wave of delightful tingles cascaded through every inch of my body. A lump of overwhelming happiness formed in my throat. I swallowed, but the exquisite ache of joy refused to go away. Paul kept his feelings under wraps because he respected me. His love is based on his interactions with them. I'd never met anyone who didn't want to take and take from me. Ken took advantage of me because I was fascinated with him and dumped me when a newer model, according to Maria, showed up. Paul pushed his chair back and stood up. He locked eyes with me with an intensity that made my heart leap. Without warning, he took a knee. I jolted in my seat as if stung. My hands flew to my mouth. "Oh my God." With a flourish that would have made David Copperfield proud, a velvet box appeared in his hand. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at Paul, unable to comprehend what was happening. The dimly lit restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us in a bubble of suspended time. I stretched a trembling hand towards the velvet box, yet afraid to touch it and break the spell. Paul's eyes never left mine, his gaze unwavering and full of unspoken words. He opened the box. A dazzling diamond ring sparkled under the soft glow of the candlelight. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the gravity of the moment. This was it. The moment that would change everything between us. Paul took a deep breath before he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper, but echoing loudly in the restaurant's hushed ambiance. Ada, will you marry me? The question hung in the air, heavy with hope and fear and love. A shiver ran through my whole body. I covered my face, then peeped through the slits my fingers made. He was still there. Oh God! Oh God! I fanned myself with both hands, my gaze darting in every direction, then settling on him. My eyes brimmed with tears. Yes, yes, Paul. I'll marry you. The restaurant erupted in applause. Both staff and patrons witnessed this moment of pure, unspoken love. Paul took my left hand and slid the ring on. Tears of happiness rolled down my cheeks and kept on coming. Chapter 14. I caught my reflection in the mirror in Paul's bathroom. The diamond on my ring finger blazed like a welder's torch. I covered my mouth, barely muffling the squeal that escaped my quivering lips. Footsteps approached the bathroom. I whirled to 3 quick raps on the door. Darling, are you all right? Can I get you anything? The voice came through, gentle but concerned. My lips quivered. I'm okay. The words tumbled out of me. I'll be out in a moment. There was a pause. Another pause. Do you like it? I swallowed. My fingers did a quick work of the buttons on my blouse. I pulled down my jeans and kicked it off. My bra and panties, the good lacy pair, were all I had on. I was glad Maria had convinced me to go home, shower, and freshen up before dinner. I slipped back into my Jimmy Choos, the sole decadence I'd allowed myself in a while. I grabbed the bathrobe hanging on the door. On second thought, I let it drop to the floor. 2 more soft taps followed. Wrapped in nothing but a whisper of lace, I swung the door open. Paul leaned against the doorframe, his eyes widening at the sight before him. His lips parted, but no words came out. He looked like he'd forgotten how to speak. I took a step closer, closing the gap between us. His cologne enveloped me, making my head spin and my heart race even faster. Do you like? My voice was barely above a breath. His gaze traveled over every inch of me, sending shivers down my spine. A slow smile spread across his face, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. Like it? He swallowed, then spoke. I absolutely love it. His voice was husky. Before another word could be said, he closed the distance between us, his hands finding their way to my hips. At that moment, everything faded away, but for the current crackling between us. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, employing the same technique I trained my asthma patients to use with their spacer and inhaler. I guided Paul to the plush armchair by the window, taking his hands in mine. We sank into its embrace, the world outside fading into a blur of city lights and distant sounds. The air between us vibrated with tension, a magnetic pull that drew us closer with each passing second. I traced the lines of his jaw, feeling the rough stubble beneath my fingertips, and he leaned into my touch with a low sigh. Paul's eyes locked on mine. I never knew you had this side to you. A soft smile played on my lips. Maybe there's a lot you still don't know about me. His warm and infectious laughter filled the room. I look forward to discovering all your hidden depths. As if propelled by an invisible force, our lips met in a gentle kiss that spoke volumes of unspoken promises. Time seemed to stand still as we lost ourselves in each other, the world outside reduced to a mere backdrop to the intensity of our connection. Paul's touch ignited a fire within me that burned brighter with each passing moment. The room hummed with anticipation, as if aware of the unspoken desires that crackled around us. We pulled away, chests heaving, eyes reaching. The silence filled with the sound of our racing hearts. Like powerful magnets refusing to be kept apart, our lips found each other again. We went at it like 2 bats eating the same plum. Our embrace deepened, and our bodies pressed together in a frenzy of desire. Epilogue. 1 year later. Paul and I were on our honeymoon in Cancun, Mexico. He swam laps with vigor while I reveled in relaxation poolside. 2 women next to me sunbathing talked non-stop. First woman, I'm scheduled for elective surgery in July in New York. Second woman, not in July, Ella. That's when new medical residents start. First woman, I don't care. I want to be camera ready for November. I just might become the most powerful woman in the world. I smiled. Everyone looked out for their self-interest. Come July, she might meet me, and things might not go as planned for her. I stretched and adjusted my sunglasses and 2-piece bikini. Under my breath, I whispered, "My God, I pulled it off." Admittedly, honesty wasn't my strongest point, not with Ken, Paul, or anyone else. But I couldn't lie to myself. My timing was impeccable, comparable to a Swiss-made Rolex watch, keeping time for Japan's Shinkansen trains. When Ken told his friends and family that we were getting married, everyone said the same thing. I didn't see it coming, but I did. I planned it all. He's 6'4", handsome, extroverted, a ladies' man, and a second-year medical resident. I'm 5'5", with a round face. You might see the cuteness if you looked long enough. I'm fresh out of medical school and dirt poor. Back then, people looked at my short hair and not very fashionable outfits and placed me in the conservative-leaning camp. I embraced it and added a Gideon Bible to my handbag, the type found in hotels, and my outfit was complete. We'll talk about those escapades another day. Hint, I had a few sugar daddies along the way. Medical school is expensive, you know. The only thing I had going for me was that I was brilliant. Excellence demands attention, but sometimes it could end up as a lamp hidden under a bushel. I was lucky a teacher saw the potential in the little orphaned girl who lived with her poor farmer uncle. She didn't want to see my mind go to waste. She became my advocate. With her help and the goodwill of others, I finished primary and secondary school. Even though my uncle tried to pull me out of school at every stage, he'd planned to have me hawk fruits on the street at 7 years old. Then later, at 16, he tried to marry me off to another poor farmer he owed money. I attended a prestigious medical school where I excelled and graduated with honors and distinctions. I wanted more, to pull myself out of poverty. That was my dream. Months before Ken and I moved to the United States, I was the wallflower house officer in his unit. One day, I overheard him on his cell phone. "My immigrant visa has come through. I'll leave for the US soon." I decided to capture his heart, soul, and mind at all costs. Ken would be my ticket out. With my short hair, old-fashioned outfits, and Gideon Bible, I wasn't anywhere close to the sophisticated girls he dated. My chances with him were in the negative. I imbibed the quote, "Energy flows where focus goes." Ken was impressed by my grasp of medicine, photographic memory, and commitment to patient care. My medical school accolades were legendary. As Oprah Winfrey once said, "You can't discriminate against excellence." I worshipped the ground he walked on and gave him my utmost undivided attention. Proximity helped too. We were on call one stormy night, lounging in the doctor's call room. Ken stood by the window, watching the rain while speaking with his fiancée Jennifer, who was in London. I walked over to him, dropped down, and blew his mind. To me, love is finding someone who makes you feel at home when the person who is meant to do so is miles away. Ken fell in love. When we moved to the US, Ken and I had a dream and a plan. He'd study while I worked to support us, but somewhere along the way, he changed the plan. I suspected his indulgence in blonde pussy when he started coming home, later and later, after study group. I should have guessed. Once a cheater, always a cheater. I confirmed it one night after he was dropped off. That night, he entered the apartment and said he wanted to stop working and spend as much time as possible studying. That was when I smelled her. He gave the excuse of having borrowed someone's hand lotion. Lame. Before then, I never knew sex had a smell. He reeked of it that night, and every other night. They say when you're neck deep in shit, you hardly smell it. Then I found blonde hair on his underwear, pants, shirt, and jacket. Later that night, we made love. When he came, the name he called out wasn't mine. Trouble had found me more like Lady Karma had finally caught up. I was legal in the US because I was married to Ken. It was only a matter of time before I was kicked to the curb and made an illegal alien. I needed a plan, fast, find a replacement for him. I hatched a plan to use his plea for more study time as a launchpad. My boss, Dr. Paul Abel, was my target. He was single and rich, and he liked me. I wore fashionable clothes, my hair had grown out, and the Bible was gone. I remember walking into his clinic, looking for work. Anything, I'd pleaded, even filing. He'd raised an eyebrow. You, a doctor, would do that? I nodded. My plan to borrow money from him was to have a reason to be near him and make him part of my future. I wore a simple red dress, curve-hugging with a teasingly short hem. He fought a good battle, trying to keep his eyes on my face. By the end of 60 seconds, I knew he was a breast man. He was a man, and men love to hunt. Sometimes, they'd need encouragement from the prey, which this prey intended to provide, and did provide. Cleavage-showing dresses moving forward, and subtle rejections, push-pull. I asked for an advance on my salary, and I was lucky. My timing was perfect. Selena, the office manager, had a medical emergency with her mom, which was pure golden luck. I took the job as soon as it was offered. When I told Ken, he saw the potential of losing me to Paul, but it aligned with his plan. More time to keep his new girl happy. Things went well. I learned the ins and outs of running Paul's clinic. I was the first thing he saw when he entered the office and the last before leaving. I went above and beyond to ensure I was indispensable to Paul in the office. A week before Valentine's Day, Ken mentioned they would have a significant study push on the 14th of February. I knew he was taking her out to dinner. I knew it was Valentine's Day, and I planned to use the evening to progress things with Paul. If Paul worked late, he'd want to feed me as usual, as a thank you for working late. To guarantee Paul a busy day on the 14th, I called all his patients with appointments and asked if they could reschedule. A good number did, and the weather helped. The 14th turned out to be one of our busiest days. As expected, Paul asked me to dinner as a thank you, and I said yes. I knew reservations would be tight too, so I made one a week ahead at Vista Verde. The dinner with Paul was to break the ice on a memorable day. If you let a man talk about himself for 2 hours, he'll think you're the only solution to a midlife crisis. The evening with Paul went as planned. But I was in for a surprise. When I returned to the apartment, Ken was already home. His ego must have been bruised when Dr. Abel dropped me off in his Mercedes. A girl can't plan for every contingency. Ken accused me of cheating. Imagine that. The cobra calling, the mamba poisonous. He indeed caught me off guard when he said he was leaving me. He had a plan too. Call a rose a weed and uproot it. The selfish bastard. My feathers had been ruffled. Some plucked right off. Now I had to accelerate my plan, hook Paul and reel him in. Selena was back when I got to the office. Talk of bad guys closing in. It took a week before I told Paul that Ken and I had issues. I'd expected Paul to take advantage of my vulnerability, but he didn't. Instead, he advised me to find Ken and talk things over. Now, I was a nervous wreck. Things were not working as planned. Throwing myself at Dr. Abel might blow up in my face. I didn't want to take chances, so I saw Ken. I even tried to seduce him again, but once beaten. Surprise, surprise, Ken was like me. He yanked the rug out from underneath me. The girl he met had connections to help him snag one of the competitive residency spots. It was over. I got home. He'd moved out and filed for divorce. That was my plan too. I'd opened our saved bottle of wine and drank deeply as tears of joy streamed down my cheeks. But I still didn't have a replacement for Ken. That put my immigrant status in jeopardy. I could get deported. I was a nervous wreck. But my charm had worked on Paul. He took me out to dinner and, to my surprise, proposed. He accepted me for who I was, not just my academic achievements and struggles growing up. Dreams do come true, especially when you nurture them with perseverance. The end. I hope you enjoyed Dreams and Deceptions by Ifani Esimai. Please subscribe and click on the bell to be notified when new stories are uploaded. Until then, goodbye.